My father exchanged my childhood for a piece of land, and the old man thought that affection was something you did on your knees in the pigsty. Ah, my dear, if you knew what it was like to have your name sold for 2 pieces of dry land and an old fence, you'd understand why I still don't trust anyone. It wasn't illness, it wasn't tragedy. What took my life away was a signature on paper. My father's signature, of course, because I was only called to put on the dress. My name is Dorothy Mayfield. I'm from Eustace, Texas, and today I'm 82 years old. But back then, my life was different. I woke up early, put on my cotton dress with the patch on the hem, and went to school with the other girls on the dirt road. And how I loved that place, you see. It was just a small classroom, 3 rows of desks, a tough teacher who beat the desk with a ruler, but it was there that I felt like I belonged. I even had a little reading medal that I won once. It was tucked away in my pocket, and I would put my finger on it when the world seemed difficult. I was good at history, good at writing, and I had dreams. Yes, I wanted to be a teacher too. I thought it was beautiful when Mrs. Ellen read aloud, making everyone sit still with just one word. I told my mother that one day I was going to teach too. She just shook her head and said that girls who are too smart don't get a husband. Things were different at home. My father, Donald, was a hard man. He worked in the fields, but what he really liked was promises. He promised crops that never came, animals that never stopped dying, and he said that our lives would improve. It never did. My poor mother was his shadow. She always kept her eyes down, busy with the children and with me. She only said what was necessary. The truth is that I was brought up in silence. Nobody said I love you in that house. Nobody asked if you were all right. But I had my friend, Mary Lou. We'd come home from school singing, making plans. She said she was getting married for love. I laughed. Marry? We're getting out of here, Mary Lou. You're going to study, work, buy our books. And she'd reply, at least you've got the mind for it. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I had everything. The head, the dream, the will. I just didn't have a choice. Because one day, my father came home early. His face was red from the sun and the problem. He said that the situation was tight, that Mr. Amos, the owner of the land next door, was threatening to take our share. He said the only way was to make a deal. And when my mother asked what the deal was, he replied with the cleanest face in the world, Dorothy marries him, and the debt is paid off. The room fell silent. My mother didn't say a word. And I thought it was a joke. You know that nervous laugh that escapes? That's right. I laughed. Only nobody laughed with me. The next day, I didn't go back to school, not even to say goodbye. Mary Lou knocked on the door. My mother sent her away. I stayed locked in my room, listening to the quiet conversation on the other side of the wall. They said it was for the best, that it was fate, that it was for the family. They called it honor. I called it a betrayal. They pulled out my braids, put a bow on my head, and pushed me into a future I never asked for. A makeshift white dress made from fabric that had been saved to make curtains. A man waiting at the gate with a smile that made me sick. And my parents looking as if they'd solved a problem. That's how it started, baby. But it was only the beginning. I could start this part by saying that I woke up with hope. But let's be honest, hope doesn't exist when you're thrown from school straight into an old man's bed. Hope died the day my father signed that damn agreement and handed me over like a sack of corn. I arrived at Amos's house like someone entering a cell. The door slammed behind me and the noise echoed in my chest. I was silent, trying to take deep breaths so as not to vomit from nervousness. He, with that look of a cattle owner, he showed me around the house with the same enthusiasm as someone showing a new stable. This is the kitchen. Over there, where you'll sleep. And that corner, where you'll wash your clothes. Understood? He didn't even look at me. That night, he didn't ask me to eat. He put his plate on the table and said, "Women who can't shut up don't deserve dinner." I didn't even know what I'd done, but I understood quickly. With him, anything could turn into a mistake. I'd wake up before the sun. He washed clothes that looked like they had just come from a funeral. He cooked without salt because the salt was locked away. He used to say that young women don't know how to use seasoning, so they don't deserve it. I listened to this as I watched him fill his plate with food that he made a point of preparing himself whenever he wanted. And when I tried to take an extra piece of bread, he'd say, Bread isn't for decorating spoiled girls, it's for feeding workers. And I kept quiet. In the early days, there were still people who passed in front of the house and waved. He made a point of hiding me. She told me to stay in the back and pretend I was busy. Once the neighbor came to ask about me. He replied, "She's adapting. A woman brought up in the shade needs to learn what the sun is." And he laughed. He laughed with gusto. I, hiding behind the door, felt my blood run cold. There was a corner of the house that he wouldn't let me enter. It was a little room with a padlock. When I asked, he said through gritted teeth, "If you ask again, you'll spend the night outside with the pigs. And without your clothes?" I thought it was a threat, the kind you say out loud. Then one day he did. It was after lunch, if that bitter broth can be called that. I accidentally knocked over the pan. I burned myself. I screamed. And he, with the calm of someone who had already planned it, grabbed my arm, dragged me to the back door, and said, "Since you're no good at looking after the house, you can learn from the animals. Sleep with them. You'll learn to obey." He took off my clothes as if he were taking off a dirty shirt and pushed me into the pigsty. Right there, mud, feces, the smell of animals, and me, cowering as if my body was to blame. The next morning, he made me go back inside as if nothing had happened. He put a plate on the table and said, "Eat, but if you spill again, you'll go back there." And so I carried on. A mistake was punishment. A wrong silence was punishment. A crossed eye was punishment. And always with the idea that I needed to learn. He loved that word. He used to say that a new woman needs to be tamed, like a wild horse. In the second month, he woke me up in the middle of the night just to ask if I remembered the debt. "Your father gave you up because you weren't worth what you owed. You're cheaper than an old tractor." And he laughed. Can you believe he laughed, my dear? He laughed at every humiliation. Once I slammed my finger in the door out of nervousness. He looked at me and said, "At least now you're learning to feel pain the right way. Even a donkey didn't deserve to live like that." And no, there was no one to tell, no one to help. Small towns only care when the scandal breaks. As long as the dirt stays quiet, nobody asks. The neighbors saw that I disappeared from school, but they never came to find out why. One night it rained heavily. The house was dripping, the wind was whipping, and I was shivering. Not from cold, but from fear. Because I knew he was coming. He always came after anger, after the crooked food, the wrong look, the shabby towel. But that night he didn't come. He sat on the porch, watching the rain, with a glass in his hand, and I saw in his eyes that it wasn't calm. It was a storm waiting to hit. It was no longer a question of if, it was just when. I knew it. I could feel it in the way he walked around the house, slower, more calculated. I knew the bill was coming. He said he'd overdone it. Married girls have to play the role of women, but I had been getting away with it. From day one, I made up excuse after excuse. At first, I said I was dirty in there, that I had bled, that it was a sin to touch. He was superstitious. He was afraid of everything that involved a woman's body. Fear and disgust, a useful ignorance for me. I took advantage of it. Then I started telling him that I was hurt, that I felt pain, that maybe it was some kind of disease that you can touch. It worked. For a while, it worked. He would stop, mumble, turn away, and I breathed a sigh of relief, but only on the outside, because on the inside, it was like I was sitting on a powder keg with the wick burning slowly. And one night, it did, halfway through winter, cold, a wind that cut through even my thoughts. I was already lying down, trying to pretend I was asleep. He entered the room quietly. Just the sound of his heavy breathing chilled me more than the floor of the house. He stopped next to me. I didn't open my eyes. I wanted to disappear. "You always sleep early, don't you?" he said quietly. There was hatred in his voice. I stayed still. "It's been too long. You're not a child anymore. I'm your husband." I took a deep breath. I tried to repeat the litany. "I'm still impure. It still hurts there," I said in the shakiest voice my courage would allow. He didn't answer. He just pulled the blanket over me. The rest I can't tell you. Not because I've forgotten, but because if I tell it in full, you'll never sleep peacefully again. And I'll never lean on that memory again without shuddering. All I'm saying is that he didn't accept any more excuses. He wouldn't accept anything else. He held me down like a rebellious animal. He beat me. He immobilized me. He did what he wanted, the way he wanted. Then he got up, went to the sink, wiped his hands like someone wiping off fingernail dirt, and went to sleep. I stayed. I lay there, immobile, trying to understand what was left of me. Because there, that night, there wasn't just a scarred body. A piece of my soul remained, a piece that hasn't returned to this day. And worse, it became routine. It kept coming back, every week, sometimes on the same day, without warning, without looking me in the face. And I became more and more withdrawn, because even running away wasn't an option. Even dying didn't seem like a solution. I just carried on automatic, carrying a body that no longer felt like mine. Until one day, he went too far. He was fiddling with the clay pots near the door, old, cracked, heavy pots. I was crouched down, washing his clothes as usual. He came in, said something disgusting that isn't worth repeating, and came up behind me laughing. My body shook so much that the water in the basin almost turned over. And there I saw it. He was coming again. I picked up the vase. I didn't even think. I just swung hard. It hit the side of his head with a thud that made even the nut in the front run. He fell on his side, staggered, but didn't faint. I didn't have time to run. I had no time at all. He stood up, looked at me with his eyes downcast, full of anger and hatred, and didn't shout. He just came. He grabbed me by the hair and dragged me across the balcony to the backyard. The ground cut through me, every pebble opening my skin. I didn't care. The pain in my body was less than the dread that came with it. He threw me into the pigsty. Again. But this time, it was worse. It was cold, bone-chilling cold. And I wasn't dressed. I stood there with my body full of mud, feces, and blood. The cold came in through my pores, my wounds, my mouth. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. Just dry sobs. The night passed, slowly, cruelly. The floor stiffened. My legs went numb. My chest tried to beat. Just when I thought I was going to black out for good, I felt the sow's snout nuzzle me. She lay on my side, huge, warm. I stayed there, glued to her, curled up in her belly like a frightened animal trying to survive. And if it hadn't been for that warmth, I swear, I wouldn't have made it out alive. What's worse than freezing to death is living with the feeling that your existence isn't even worth a dirty straw. But that night, I had to admit, even animals have more compassion than men. The next day, he opened the gate, as if nothing had happened. He threw down an old towel and told me to clean up. And I did, every inch of it. But nothing came out, not the shame, not even the anger. And it was there, on that freezing morning, with my nails caked in dirt and my skin burning, that I decided that this couldn't be the end of my story. It couldn't. But before I could make up my mind, something worse came along. If you're still with me here, leave a like, will you? Because every like is a "I hear you" for this old woman who just wanted to be heard when she needed it most. After that night in the pigsty, when the sow was more of a mother than my own mother, a part of me broke down for good. I stopped resisting, not out of weakness, out of pure survival instinct. It was this or freeze again. It was either that or become a corpse forgotten in the mud. So when he came at night, I didn't even pretend to sleep anymore. I just turned over in the corner and prayed inside. Not for salvation. Salvation, I knew, no longer existed for me. I prayed that it would pass quickly, for it to be over soon, for him to leave the room without inventing something worse. But what nobody told me was that there are people who, when they realize you've stopped resisting, won't let up. They want more. They want to see how far the suffering goes. They want to bend your soul until it breaks. That's when the worst phase of all began. First, it was with words. "You're no good, Dorothy. Only to obey." I was used to that. He'd always said that. But then he started to come with a different twinkle in his eye. A lively way. An enthusiasm that was scary. One day, he called me out to the barn. "I want you to help me out here." I went. I always did. I knew that to refuse was to be beaten. And it wasn't a figure of speech. It was a real beating. Hard. When I got there, he told me to stay close to the horses. Touch them. Hand them gently, as if they were your offspring. I froze. Go on, as if they were your offspring. I want to see how you take care of animals, woman. And he just watched, quiet, with that disgusting smile, his eyes squeezed shut, his breathing funny. You could feel the tension in the air, the smell of sweaty hay, his sweat, my shame. That wasn't care. It wasn't affection. It was dirty. It was perversity disguised as a task. I would touch the animals, trembling inside. The horses looked at me, poor things, as if they knew I didn't want to be there, as if they knew that it was all too wrong even for their animal instincts. I tried to refuse. Once. I said, I don't want to do this. It's not right. It was the only time I had the courage to raise my voice. He went to the wall of the barn, took the strap, the one he used to tame a wild horse, and came at me. He didn't shout. He just raised his arm, and down he went, on my shoulder, down my back, down my leg. The strap wasn't just leather. It had an iron tip. Each blow burned. The skin split open. Blood oozed out. And I didn't scream. I just cringed, like an animal, because that's what he wanted, to see me small, submissive, bent over. After that, I never said no again. I did. I rubbed my hands on the horses as he told me to, pretending it was normal, pretending it was just another farm job, pretending I wasn't rotting from the inside. I held in my vomit so tightly that my whole body shook. I only let go when he turned his back. When he said, "Go away now." It was always like that. He'd stay there, alone, and I'd walk home with dragging steps. Halfway there, I'd pull up behind the shed and throw up everything in my stomach, everything I wanted to get out of me. But it wouldn't come out. It never came out. The worst thing was knowing that the next day there would be more, because he loved it. It became his sick ritual, a game where he was the owner, the coach, and the judge. And me? I was just another piece, a used creature, as disposable as the old hoe he dumped in the corner of the balcony. And if I was late, he beat me. If I cried, he beat me more. Because according to him, a woman who cries is ungrateful. And I should be grateful that I'm still standing. If you think that's an exaggeration, you've never seen what happens when a man with too much power decides to play God. Because that's what he did. He created rules, dictated punishments, decided who deserved air and who deserved mud. And in that house, I was mud. At the end of every night, after everything, I would sit on the floor of the bedroom, leaning against the wall, my body throbbing, the smell of the animals still stuck to my skin. And I stayed there, without thinking, without feeling, just waiting for the next order. What made me speak that day wasn't courage. It was nausea, sickness of pretending, of smiling for no reason, of swallowing the bitter taste of a life I didn't choose. I'd been walking around like a shadow in that house for a long time, without a voice, without a name, without anything. Just obedience and silence, until the guests arrived. Old Amos, with the swagger of someone who thinks he owns the world, announced in the morning, "People are coming today. Take care of the food. I want the house clean." And that was that. He announced as if I were the ground cloth of the situation, not a person. In the late afternoon, a cart came up the mud road. It was carrying a big, scruffy guy with a sweat-stained shirt and an easy laugh, a friend of Amos, it seemed. And next to him, a girl, young, with the eyes of someone who has seen too much and a tight mouth like someone who has learned to shut up too soon. She seemed to have little more time in the world than me, but in her eyes, she carried decades. You could see that her new marriage wasn't a party. It was a sentence, just like mine. I had to prepare the food. I cooked as best I could in between shakes. I made cornbread, heating the oven with wood I didn't want to light, while the flour stuck to my hands and my stomach churned. I made some dumplings with the rest of the lard I found. I made stew meat, and I still had to sweep the balcony and wipe down the furniture, all by myself. The girl tried to help, but her husband gave her a look that cut right through. "Go and rest, woman," he said, but the tone was more warning than caution. When it came time to serve, Amos made a point of pulling out the chairs for them. "Stay there, miss," he told me, pointing to the corner of the table. "Look and learn how to receive visitors." Dinner began as if it were a get-together of well-off people. There was forced laughter, heavy galloping, and the two men talking loudly, spitting out flour and rudeness at the same time. and we stood there, she and I, with our heads down and our plates cold. It was like a badly staged play. Their conversation went downhill. They started with stories about when they were younger, then moved on to criticizing women, of us. "These girls today are full of self-will," his friend said, chewing with his mouth open. "Mine only settled down after a few good corrections. Women need to know who's boss." Amos laughed. He gestured with his hand towards me. "This one was stubborn too, but after a few hard nights she learned. That's all she's good for." The girl on the other side held her glass so tightly that it almost broke. I saw it, and it made me feel sick inside. It wasn't anger. It was a push. That ridiculous situation. Those two pigs thinking they owned everything. Me serving food with my soul shredded. And she, looking at me as if she were seeing tomorrow's mirror. That's when I exploded. "You're a fat, dirty, rotten old man. You look like a sausage about to burst, but instead of meat, you're full of shit inside." I said it like that, with all the letters. The table froze. My friend's fork stopped in midair. The girl looked at me with a mixture of fright and pity. Amos stood up, slowly, his hand on the edge of the table, his chest heaving, his face red, his eyes, bug eyes. He came towards me, quickly, straight, and then the world went out. I'm not going to tell you in detail what happened. All I can say is that I was pushed. I fell flat on my face. I felt his weight, the hatred seeping from my skin. He said things that I don't even know were words. All I know is that he hit. He hit a lot, until his body was tired, until the floor was muddy with blood and saliva. I don't remember screaming. I just remember the muffled noise, the rising dust, the taste of iron in my mouth. Then, I don't remember anything else. I just remember waking up in the bedroom, grimy sheet, my head spinning, my eye almost closed from swelling, and next to me, the girl, the friend's wife, holding a cloth with water, tired looking, mouth dry. "You're crazy," she said, not as an insult, as if stating something obvious. "The world won't help you. Nobody's going to get you out of here. We were born for this. You either accept it or you get hit harder." She cleaned me up as best she could. She wiped the wounds, wet my forehead, made tea. She did what she could, but what stuck with me most wasn't her care. It was the warning. Then she left. She got on the cart with her husband and left without looking back. And I stayed. I stayed in bed for days, my body throbbing, my soul reeling, trying to understand what it was all about. But in the midst of all that pain, there was one certainty that never left my head. I'm not alone in this prison. And if there are others, then there's a chance of getting out. And it's through this crack that I'm going to get out. It wasn't overnight that the idea of running away was born. It fermented. Like bread dough, anger served as yeast, fear became flour, and the bruised body was the oven. By the time I realized it, it was growing inside me non-stop, because after the last beating, the one that left me not knowing where the ground ended and my face began, something inside my head snapped. Not that I became a movie heroine. I was far from that. I still woke up scared. I still shivered when I heard the door creak. I still cringed when he walked by. But now I saw him differently. The once indestructible monster suddenly began to show cracks. It was a Sunday, a holy day for the city, a day with a smell like any other on that farm. Amos was on the porch, sitting in the rocking chair that never rocked. He just stood there, snorting, like a lazy bull grazing on shit. I was cleaning some pots in the kitchen when I heard him complain of a pain in his back, a twinge, a strong one. It made him jump up like a frightened frog. Pain? Oh, what a shame, I thought. But of course I looked worried, almost like a devoted widow. There, I realized that the old man wasn't eternal. His body was going to rot like any other, and that maybe I didn't need to wait for him to die of old age to get out of there. I began to observe every step, every itch, every long nap. I wrote everything down in my head like someone who studies wild animals. How long he slept, when he left for the corral, where he left the wagon key, everything. One night, I noticed that he had been drinking more than usual. I said to myself, he's going to pass out early tonight. I was right. He slept like a stone, with the snoring of someone who fears neither God nor the devil. I took the opportunity to go to the storeroom. There, in the corner, was an old lamp and a piece of rope that could, let's say, be used for something useful in the future. I didn't take anything. Not yet. I just wanted to see if I could get there without being heard. And I could. The boards were drier, the creaks less obvious. There was a path. Over the next few days I began to test my luck. I knocked over a mug on purpose. He looked at it crookedly, grumbled, but didn't hit it. The next morning, I heated the milk too much. Nothing. The old man was getting weaker. Of course, it wasn't just health, it was confidence too. After his friend's visit and the scene at the table, something had changed in him. He seemed more insecure, more irritable, yes, but less explosive, as if he knew I was about to do something, and he didn't want to provoke me. I started going out in the yard more often, alone, just watching, where the fence was lower, where the bushes provided shade, where I could disappear without too much noise. It was on one of these walks that I saw the cart, the blessed cart. It was leaning in a corner, with the horse already old, half blind, but still steady. The rope was loose. The key, as always, was in the pocket of the pants he'd dropped on the chair. I started cooking up a plan. It wasn't a movie plan. It was the plan of a woman who is more scarred than scared. Wait for him to go to sleep, pick up the pants, get on the wagon, and drive away, without looking back. No note, no goodbye. But of course, nothing is that simple. One night I almost tried. Almost. Only he got up to take a piss in the middle of the night, and he saw me standing by the door. "What are you doing there?" he asked. "Getting some air," I replied. "Watch out for the night air. It gets into your bones and rots you from the inside." I wanted to say, "More than you've already done to me?" but I kept quiet. It wasn't time to die yet. After that, I was more discreet. I pretended again. I cooked with more salt. I made the cookies he liked. I even cleaned his hat. "Are you trying to poison me with kindness?" he said. I smiled. "I'm not that creative." And he laughed. He laughed. And there, in that laugh, I knew. He no longer knew who I was. The old Dorothy who cried in the corner had died. What remained was another. One who learned, who watched, who waited for her chance like a snake waiting for its heel. Deep down, she knew she wouldn't be able to escape alone. Even if it were physically possible, the fear of being caught was bigger than the world. I needed more. I needed something to make him drop his guard, something that would make him believe that I was back on the ground. So I started to set up another scene, a trap. Now tell me, have you ever pretended to be weak just to fool someone who thought they had you? Because I have. And it was by pretending that I saved myself. If you've made it this far, leave a like. Every like is like another step on the road back to my dignity. And look, this road still has a lot of ground to cover. Every prison has a crack. Sometimes it's a crack in the wall. Sometimes it's the old man snoring too hard. In my case, it was a skinny horse, lame in one leg and forgotten at the bottom of the pasture, which nobody had ridden for a couple of years. That was him, my ticket out. I didn't plan everything at once. I'm not one of those people who watches a movie and thinks she's going to escape life with a map under her blouse. The idea came the way good ideas always come to a tired woman, in the middle of a stupid task. I was cleaning out the animal's trough, that rotten feed that looked more like fermented clay, when I saw the little animal there, head down, sad look, but still standing. And I thought, it's you, poor thing. You're going to get me out of here. I started looking after it little by little. First I threw in some rotten fruit I found. Then I brought clean water, hidden in a bucket. I spoke softly to him. One day, I even scratched behind his ear. He neighed lightly, almost a smile. It was the first sign of affection I'd seen in that house in a long time. Amos didn't notice. Of course he didn't. He only saw his own navel, and then some. If it wasn't used for pulling loads or scaring visitors, the animal became invisible. And that's how that horse became my secret. I began to devise the plan with the delicacy of someone who sews with a short thread. In the corners, in the details, quietly. Every night, I pretended to be tired. Pretend, mind you, because I'd been tired for a long time, but now it became an excuse. I'd go to my room early, turn off the lamp and listen. His every step, every sigh. When he snored loudly, I knew I was in the world of pigs. Literally. One morning, with the sky so dark it looked like it was covered in old paint, I got up, light on my feet, breathing steady. I took a cloth and wrapped it around my neck as if to protect myself from the cold, but it was to cover up any sound, any moan of fear. I went to the back corral, the one where no one else entered, where the bushes had already taken over the fences, and there he was, my ugly goat-faced horse. But to me, he was prettier than any princess's carriage. I untied the knot in the rope, carefully. He looked at me and blinked slowly, as if to say, "Are you really going?" I climbed on. No saddle, no bridle, no glory. The plan was simple. Follow the old road to the mill, then turn off into the woods. From there, cut across to the main road. If it worked, I'd be gone before the sun. If it went wrong, well, then I'd die trying, which frankly was an improvement. Of course, the universe doesn't like women who dare. At the horse's first strong step, it stalled. He stopped halfway and started snorting. I stood there, trying to convince him, whispering, promising heaven, freedom, sweet corn. He walked a little further, a little crooked, a little tortured, but he went. And that's when the fence came down. Literally. One of the boards of the corral came crashing down. It wasn't where I was. It was there, near the house. A dry noise, firm. And I froze. So did the horse. I kept listening. Nothing. After a time that seemed like a decade, I took a deep breath and played again. Faster now. It picked up speed. Clumsy with a crooked kick, but it ran. It ran as if it knew that our lives depended on it. In the middle of the bush, I lost my slipper. Then my dignity, I tore the hem of my clothes on a branch, scratched my face, swallowed a mosquito, but I kept going. I only stopped when he got tired. And even then, only for minutes. Towards the end of the night, with the sky clearing and my leg trembling, I saw the first sign of a hedge. It was the entrance to the neighboring town. I had arrived. I got off my horse with shaky legs. I looked drunk. I walked on, stumbling, until I found a gate. I knocked. An old lady opened it, suspicious. She looked at me from head to toe. "Miss, where did you run from?" "From myself," I replied. She didn't understand, and she didn't need to. She gave me a clean cloth, a glass of water and a towel to cover my body. I sat on the bench on the balcony with the sun rising and thought, I did it. But I didn't know that hell doesn't give up so easily, because Amos was going after it. The sun had barely warmed the earth, and the day already promised to be bad. I woke up to the smell of Mrs. Eleanor's coffee and the familiar sound of roosters crowing as usual. But then there was a strange silence, a silence that made my heart leap. I got up, fixed my dress, which was still the same as the day I ran away, and went out onto the balcony. That's when I saw it. Amos, mounted on his black horse, standing right in front of the fence, spitting hatred out of his eyes. And worse, he looked like he thought he was right. Donna Eleanor came out right behind me, holding the clay mug with a coffee stronger than a slap in the face. She wasn't afraid of anything. She'd already buried 2 husbands, raised 5 children on her own, and beaten a pig with a short stick. She had the kind of presence that could silence a drunk in a bar. And that day, she seemed even bigger. "Look who's come to dirty the view early on," she said, without raising her voice. "She's my wife," he replied dryly. "She ran away from my house, took my things. I've come to get them. Taking your smell, your name and your disgrace doesn't count as stealing." "No," she retorted. "Go away, Amos, before I decide to let Dente loose." Tooth, that was the dog. A brute, a mixture of German shepherd and rage and revenge. He didn't bark for nothing, but when he did, even the roof tiles shook, and he was already watching Amos, growling low, with the hairs on his neck standing up. Amos pretended not to care. He got off his horse. He stomped off with that swagger, his chest puffed out, his belly jutting out of his shirt. And he walked. He passed through the fence as if he were entering his own farm. Then he did the wrong thing. He tried to open the front gate. That's when Dente jumped out. The sound was ugly. It tore through the silence with a growl that seemed to come from the depths of hell. The dog lunged forward without hesitation, digging its teeth into his leg with a rage that, look, even seemed personal. Amos screamed. And it wasn't the cry of an angry male. It was a scream of fright, pain, and panic. He fell sideways, kicked the air, tried to push the dog. but Dente wouldn't let go. It wasn't until Mrs. Eleanor whistled and screamed twice, because one scream wasn't enough, that the animal let go. The old man remained on the ground, rolling, holding his bloodied calf, moaning like a little pig about to turn into Greaves. I stood there on the porch, looking at everything, cold, just watching. "Do you want to go in now, or are you going back to your hole?" she said, with the air of someone asking if the bread was warm. He tried to get up. He was limping. He grabbed the railing of the fence with his hands shaking, his face red, his eyes watering. He didn't even look at me. He got on his horse, rode with difficulty, and left with his dignity dripping down the muddy path. The neighborhood saw. There were 2 children further along playing in the road. One of the kids pointed. "Look, Mom, the fat old man's been bitten." "And me?" "And me?" I almost smiled. Almost. But it wasn't time yet. Mrs. Eleanor came back into the house as if she'd just gone to the yard to get some lemons. She looked at me and said, "Shameless men don't learn well. He just bites." I sat down. My legs were shaking, not from fear, from relief. For the first time, someone had defended me without me asking. For the first time, an animal barked at me. And that, my goodness, was more than any relative, neighbor, or priest had ever done in my entire life. Over the next few days, Amos disappeared. Or rather, he hid. They said he was in bed taking pain and shame medication, that the bite had become infected, that he couldn't even walk properly. Some laughed. Others said that his wife, me, was crazy, and I let them think whatever they wanted. The important thing was that he was far away. Meanwhile, Mrs. Eleanor and I became even closer. She helped in the vegetable garden, swept the field, and baked the bread. In the evenings, we'd sit on the porch, and she'd tell us stories about the war, about when she was a girl, and she'd stick a knife in anyone who touched it without permission. I listened with my chest full of something I no longer recognized. It was almost peace. But of course, it doesn't last long, because even if he was sick, even if he was limping, even if he had his tail between his legs, Amos was still Amos. And a bad man doesn't die easily. He dies slowly, it drags on, and he comes back. Not every hole you climb out of stays behind. Some come after you with the legs and voice of people. That's how my past came back to spit in my face, on a bad horse, smelling of old sweat, and in the form of my father. That's right, the man who sold me like someone who trades a skinny cow for a sack of corn. The news arrived as misfortune always does, at a gallop. 2 horses were coming down the clay road. One of them I recognized by his crooked gait, Amos. The other, by the anger that rose in my throat at hearing the name that Mrs. Eleanor spoke with disgust. "He's your father." I froze. I stood in the doorway with the water from the basin still running down my fingers. Mrs. Eleanor pulled me by the arm. "Get down, now." And that's when I learned her secret. Underneath the house there was a trap door hidden with a false lid made of dirty wood. From the outside it looked like part of the old floorboards. Inside it was a tight, cold, dark hole, like mourning. "I used this in the war to hide ammunition and food," she said. "Now it will serve to hide your dignity." I crawled inside with my heart beating so loudly it sounded like a procession drum. I lay on my side, the hard floor hurting my ribs. I heard footsteps upstairs. The voices. "Where is she?" the old man asked. I didn't say my daughter. He said her. It was clear which side he was on. "She left. The day the other guy came to pick her up. He hitched a ride with a peddler and disappeared. I thought it was strange, but everyone should look after their own life," replied Mrs. Eleanor without stuttering. She lied with gusto. Amos didn't swallow it easily. "Don't lie to me, old woman. I know she's still here." "You know nothing. Go look elsewhere." "She's my daughter," my father said with a firmness that made me want to vomit. "She has to obey me. She was brought up to respect her father and husband." Oh, respect! That word made me tremble with rage inside the hiding place. Respect isn't asked for, it's given. And they never gave me anything but shame. Outside, Dente already had his hair on end. He sniffed their legs like a sinner. He lowered his muzzle and bared his teeth. His growl was uglier than a promise of revenge. They tried to get in. They wanted to look. But every time they approached the balcony, Dente advanced. He growled like a soul guard. And they, macho men with big mouths, backed away like frightened children. "That bug is going to give you trouble," my father said. "More than you have already," replied Mrs. Eleanor. They stood there for a while longer. They tried to intimidate. They spoke loudly. They said they were going to call the law. They threatened. But deep down they knew. They had no proof, no order, no morals. They left as they came, spitting dust and defeat. But they didn't disappear. At night I could still hear them. Horses beating hooves far away. A branch breaking. A light step trying to spy. They kept circling, like vultures waiting for the bug to fall. And there was Mrs. Eleanor, sitting with her rifle on her lap and Dente lying at her feet, ready for anything. "You'll have to leave," she said on the third day. "As long as there's your shadow here, those two won't rest." I didn't cry. I didn't have any more tears for that kind of thing. I already knew that peace was going to be expensive, and that what awaited me wasn't a happy ending. It was just another beginning. The following week, Mrs. Eleanor's cousin showed up with his truck. He was heading south, passing through a town where no one knew me. She talked to him quietly. He handed her some bread, some coins, and asked, "Take this girl far away, where no one knows her face or her name, and if anyone asks, tell them she's dead." She died and was born again. When it was time to leave, I hugged Mrs. Eleanor as if I were hugging the last good thing in the world. She squeezed my face with both hands and said, her eyes deep with anticipatory longing, "No man will find you where your silence hides you, but only if you shut up and walk." I climbed into the truck. Dente ran after me for a few meters, then stopped and stared at me. I almost cried. I almost did, but I remembered that a promise of freedom doesn't accept tears. So off I went, with a broken body, a full mind, and a future more uncertain than that cloudy sky. But with one certainty, I'll never go back. They say that changing cities is changing your life. Those who say that have never spent more than a week trying to wake up without being scared. They've never heard the sound of the wind like a man's footstep behind the door. They've never had to relearn how to walk down the street as if the ground was still someone else's property. Well then, I've changed. But my head came with it. The new town, Roselake, Kentucky, was one of those where the dog on the street is known by name and the bakery closes at 5. I ended up there thanks to one of Eleanor's cousins who arranged a ride for me in a milk truck. The journey was long, cramped, and smelled sour, but no more so than my memory. I arrived at the house of Nancy, the cousin's third cousin, who welcomed me with a, "There's a bed over there, the bathroom is shared, and I don't like people who talk a lot." Perfect. I didn't even remember what it was like to speak without choosing my words carefully. Nancy lived in a wooden house that seemed suspended on faith alone. It had a balcony where the cats dominated and a yard that smelled of onions and vinegar. I slept in a tiny room with thin walls and a window that didn't close properly, but it was quiet. There was no screaming, no hanging strap, no pig breathing next to me. On the second day, I got a job in a snack bar, a typical roadside diner with a formica counter and the smell of bacon clinging to the sole of the walls. The owner was a woman called Helen who wore cigarettes as lipstick and didn't ask anything more than, "Can you clean a plate?" I said yes. Cleaning was my business. Working was easy. Smiling was hard. Every time a man called me sweetheart or darling, my stomach turned. I smiled back, but it was fake, not because I wanted to, because it was the only way to keep my job. People who don't smile lose their tips. People without tips go hungry. At the end of the day, I'd come home with my feet aching, my shoulders heavy, and my thoughts swirling like flies on forgotten food. I lay down. I tried to sleep, but there was always that moment, that second before I blacked out, when my body remembered the other bed, the dirty bed, the thick hand, the fear of breathing wrong. Sometimes I dreamt of the pigsty, not the cold, not the smell, but of the sow, the one who lay on my side as if she wanted me alive. I'd wake up curled up, my heart beating fast. I'd only get over it after washing my face with cold water and repeating to myself, "I'm not there. He doesn't know where I am." Nancy wasn't one to talk, but one day while I was chopping onions for dinner, she said, "You sleep badly?" I didn't reply. "You talk in your sleep?" Snippets, like someone begging without meaning to. I kept cutting. The onion burning in my eyes was excuse enough. If you want to stay mute, fine, but don't pretend it's over, because it's not. It was the longest conversation we'd had in 2 months. In the 3rd month, I started saving money. $1 here, 50 cents there. I kept it in a glass jar under my bed. Not to run away, not again, but maybe one day I'd rent a room of my own, a space with no memories, a beginning, a real start. I also began to mentally write a new story about myself. Dorothy, the woman who came to look after her sick aunt. Dorothy, Nancy's cousin who wants to become a cook. Dorothy, the discreet girl who lost her parents early and has no past. It was easier than telling the truth, and frankly, nobody wanted to hear it. The local church held charity events. I was asked. I refused. I said I worked too much. That was a lie. It was fear. Too close to place, too many people, too many questions. I preferred the cafeteria counter, where every customer was a stranger and every tip was just money. No affection, no exchange, just what I needed. But sometimes alone on the balcony, I thought. I wondered if one day I'd be able to stop reacting as if every man was him. If one day a touch on the shoulder would make me turn around without fright. If a good morning would sound like just that, a good morning. I didn't know, but I was trying. Trying was all I could give at that moment. Trying to get up, trying to cook, trying to laugh even if it came out crooked. Trying not to hate my own body. Trying to sleep with the door closed without checking it 3 times. Trying was my religion, and at this new altar I prayed softly. May no one find me. May no one return me to that version of myself that almost didn't make it out alive. Now tell me, have you ever tried to start again carrying pieces of a past that is still throbbing? Because I'm still trying, and every step away from that hell is worth more than any excuse the world can give. If you've made it this far, leave a like. Every like is one less stone on the road back to the hole I crawled out of. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. It was just an invitation for a piece of cake, a corn cake, freshly brewed coffee, a table in the neighbor's yard, people chatting, and me pretending everything was fine. But for me, it was as if they were asking me to cross a minefield in a white dress. It all started on a Tuesday. I was coming back from the cafeteria with the smell of fried food impregnated in my soul and my feet begging for mercy. My neighbor June stopped me at the gate. There's going to be a bake-off here at the house on Saturday. Just some women from the neighborhood. A simple thing. I replied with the polite smile of someone who has already imagined 50 ways to say no without seeming rude. But before I could finish excuse number 27, she added, just for a laugh, you always look like you've seen a ghost. I wanted to say, no, I didn't, young lady. I was the ghost. But I swallowed the answer. I've always swallowed a lot of things. I spent the next few days rehearsing the perfect excuse. Headache, extra work, invented relatives. But on Saturday, there I was, standing in front of the cracked bedroom mirror, with my clothes less wrinkled and my heart beating like a funeral drum. I went. June's house was too tidy, smelling of candles and cookies at the same time. There were artificial flowers in painted margarine jars, crocheted curtains, and a radio playing gospel music at an indecisive volume. The women were all there, laughing loudly, with patterned dresses and manicured nails, holding cups as if the coffee was made of gold. I sat in a corner, very close to the exit, just to make sure. June brought me a slice of cake. I pretended to eat it. It smelled good, but my stomach had a memory. Any gathering of people made me queasy. The conversation began lightly. A bread recipe, a husband's fight with a blocked drain, the latest gossip in town, until one of them, a Carol, turned to me and asked, "And you, Dorothy? Where did you come from again?" The world stopped. My mouth went dry. I wanted to get up and run, trip over the lace tablecloth and knock everything over, but I forced myself to breathe. "From the north," I replied. "Do you have any family?" She stayed there. "Married?" "Not anymore." They were quiet for a second, a silence that weighs, the kind people use to digest lies. June said, "She's quiet, but she's good people. She works hard and doesn't bother you." "Ah, that's a nice compliment, isn't it? Good people because she doesn't bother, because she doesn't talk, because she doesn't ask. Almost a piece of furniture. And that's what they expect from us. A discreet presence, a low voice, invisible life." I stayed there for another 20 minutes. Then I said I had to work early on Sunday. That was a lie. but everyone believed me, because women who work a lot are synonymous with don't ask questions. I went home with my head full and my chest tight. I sat on the bed and stared at the peeling ceiling. The truth is that June's invitation, as innocent as it was, had messed me up, because deep down I wanted to accept. I wanted to laugh at nonsense, talk about the weather, discuss which yeast makes the cake fluffier. But fear still lives inside me. With every loud laugh, I hear a scream. In every outstretched hand, I see a belt. In every innocent question, I see judgment in disguise. The next day, June brought me a wrapped piece of cake. There's some left. I know you didn't eat yours. I thanked her. I kept it. I ate it alone at night in silence. And it was good, not because of the taste, but because for a moment it felt like I could chew on the past and swallow it without choking. I tried to carry on going to work as if nothing had affected me. But it had. Every time someone said, "Shall we go out after work?" my body reacted as if it had heard an alarm. "Number, I can't. I'm busy." That's a lie. I was too busy trying not to fall apart. Nancy noticed. One day she told me the truth. "You're not going to live if you keep running away from everything." I replied, "Living is a luxury. At the moment, I'm just trying not to lose myself again." She didn't insist, but she looked at me with pity. And pity is worse than a slap. That's when I realized trauma is an invisible leash. You walk on it loosely, but every time you try to get off the leash, something pulls. And it pulls hard, even without a hand, even without a voice. But one day, I'm going to break that collar. Maybe I'll start with another piece of cake. Maybe. June was one of those who wouldn't shut up. She would even talk to the kettle while waiting for the coffee to come on. Ever since that cake of shame that nearly gave me a heart attack, she'd been sticking to me like an annoying cousin who won't take no for an answer. Every week she came up with a new excuse. Church bingo, Sunday market, sewing meeting, tea with the neighbors. I said no, more than a believer says no to cachaça. But she insisted, and every no from me was just more gasoline for her fire. I ended up giving in. First a quick coffee, then a trip to the grocery store. The next thing I knew, I was helping her cut fabric for a new cushion in the living room. And in the meantime, we created a friendship of the sincere kind, where silence also counts. She didn't ask too many questions. She'd just show up with cake and say, "I'm here if you want to talk." And one day I did. I'd been in Roselick for about 4 months. It was late at night, a fine rain hitting the roof, her house smelling of cinnamon. We were sitting on the sofa, her embroidering, me curling a lock of hair and feeling my chest tighten. "June," I said, my voice a little stuck. She looked up. She didn't say anything. She just stopped embroidering. I told her everything. I didn't flower. I didn't cry. I didn't make a drama. I just poured it out. From the sale my father made to the day I hid in the bomb hole under Mrs. Eleanor's house. I talked about Amos, the nights in the barn, the fear, the anger, the escape, the marks that no one could see. When I finished, the silence was so heavy that I thought she was going to send me away. But all she said was, "I knew you carried big things, but I hadn't imagined it." She stayed quiet for a while. Then she said, "I know there are bad men, but what you've experienced isn't a man. It's an animal. And your father should rot in life." He cried. Not me. She did. And after that she never looked at me with pity, only with care. 2 weeks later she called me for a visit. A little farm near the stream where her family sometimes gathered. I didn't feel like it. I just wanted to get out of the house and breathe. But when I got there, she introduced me to her cousin, Eli, the same age as me, tall, dark-haired, with a crooked laugh and that look he holds without holding back. The most handsome man I've ever seen. I already knew too much about male beauty to fall for the charm. Handsome for me was synonymous with dangerous. But Eli looked different. It wasn't hunger. It was tenderness. A kind of respect that seemed more like prayer than flirtation. He asked my name calmly, as if each letter was important. He didn't ask where I came from, nor what I did. He just stood there, talking about everything and nothing. And every time June appeared anywhere, there he was too. A coincidence of first and last names. I resisted. That's obvious. For someone who's been tied down, any affection seems like a bond. June and Nancy never stopped teasing. "He's a good guy. He's just trying to be your friend. You're not going to die stranded because of pride." As they listened, and as he didn't force anything, I let my guard down. A little. I started talking to him, first with my feet back, then with my whole body turned towards him. And him, always gentle. He never crossed the line. He never spoke loudly, never touched without looking first. We became good friends, the kind who know when you're lying just by the way you hold your cup. And it was light. For the first time, lightness. No past between the lines. Just the present. Time went by. I collected enough money and bought my own corner, a simple apartment with scratched floors, a small kitchen, and a window facing the street. But it was mine. My bed, my things, my door with my own key. On moving day, Nancy hugged me tightly. She said she never had a daughter, but if she did, she'd want one like me. "The toughest woman I've ever met," she cried. I promised I'd come back if she needed me. "Anything, Nancy, anything." She nodded and pushed me toward the door. "Go live." And I did. Eli helped with the boxes. He carried my few things as if they were jewels. On the last trip, with the apartment empty and the street almost dark, he looked at me and said, "You deserve love without fear." I didn't reply. I just leaned against his chest and let the world fall silent for a few minutes. There, without a contract, without a sale, without a dowry, without a duty, we started a romance, slowly, with our feet on the ground, and the heart, with a little courage. When I closed the door to my apartment for the first time, I felt a strange feeling that I can't explain. It wasn't joy or relief. It was more like the awkward silence of someone who has waited so long for something that when it happens, seems like a lie. That small space, with cracked tiles, the smell of fresh paint and a stuck window, was everything I'd never had. Peace and quiet. I sat on the floor with a glass of water. It wasn't even to drink. It was to feel like I could drink whenever I wanted, without orders, without permission. That's all it was. Free water. Eli showed up half an hour later with a packet of cornbread. "For your first night," he said, smiling shyly. I laughed. "Are you going to marry me, or do you just want to guarantee fresh coffee?" He laughed too. But he stayed. He stayed until today. Our beginnings were suspicious. Me, traumatized, aloof. He, patient, constant. We slept in separate beds for the first few months. My choice. He never forced it. He said he just wanted to be close, even if it was on the other side of the door. And so it went. June showed up almost every day, bringing a cookie, a recipe tip, or just to chat. "It's going well," she'd say, looking at me like someone checking on a growing plant. Nancy, oddly enough, was a tough mother, even when it came to letting me go. "You don't have to thank me. Just live right," she said, her eyes wet. I thanked her just the same. It took me a while to open the door to Eli's body. His heart had been there for ages. But his body, that one carried more fear than his bones could bear. There were nights when just getting close to him made my stomach lurch. But he never complained. "I'm here to love you in your own time," he'd say, with a calm that tore me apart inside. The first time we slept together without fear was after a storm. The lightning struck so close that the window shook. I jumped out of bed, ran to the corner and curled up. He found me on the floor, covered me with the blanket, and stayed there, by my side. He didn't say a word. He just gave me the right kind of silence. The next day, I was the one who held his hand in the kitchen. And there, it really began. We got married in June's backyard. A simple table, flowers stolen from her garden, and a cornmeal cake with guava. Nancy showed up in a blue dress, her hair pinned up with gold clips. She said that if I cried, she'd hit me. In the end, she cried. Life with Eli was full of firsts. First coffee in peace, first guilt-free laugh, first deep sleep, first plan for the future. We had children. 3. The first came by surprise. I trembled. I thought I was going to repeat the cycle, raising a child in an atmosphere of fear. But Eli looked after me like someone who looks after hand-painted glass. He accompanied every examination, learned how to make tea, massaged my back without me asking. At the birth, he cried before the baby was born. "She's coming," she said, and it was true. It was a girl, strong, crying, beautiful. Then came the boys, one more rowdy than the other. The house became a war field, but a good kind of war. with toys on the floor, drawings on the wall, and milk spilled by accident, not by punishment. June was godmother to the three of them. She helped with birthdays, sewed clothes, made a fuss when she saw a low mark on the report card. Nancy taught her how to bandage them, how to distinguish crying from tantrums, and never to negotiate punishment. When the three of them got older, I went to work in the bakery with Eli. He had inherited the job from an uncle who died of fright. He fell down the stairs when he saw the price of sugar. I started by washing pans. Then I went to the counter, then the oven. I discovered that kneading dough was like hitting trauma with the palm of your hand. We sold bread, cake, and donuts. The ladies from town would come in early just to get some hot gossip. "Dorothy, have you seen the new priest? And that boy from the grocery store?" I smiled and answered politely, but inside all I could think was, "I'm busy being happy. Go look at your window." The children married. One became a mechanic, the other a teacher, the girl a nurse, all with good people on their side. None of them had to be beaten to learn respect. None of them heard shouting in the house. And when they started having children, then I discovered what real joy was. 7 grandchildren, each with their own way. One is quiet, like me. Another talks out of his ass, like June. One says she's going to be a writer. "I want to tell stories like yours, Grandma Dottie," she said. I almost fell apart. Today, in my old age, with my back begging for retirement and my knee complaining even about my slippers, I sit on the porch with Eli. He's still alive, still laughing, still finding my wrinkles funny. We have coffee, reminisce, talk about the beginning. I didn't become a saint or rich or famous, but I became free and loved. The right way, without pain, without a chain. And you know what's most beautiful? I never had to sell my soul, forgive those who didn't ask, or forget what they did. I just had to keep going and follow firmly. So if you've made it this far, listening to me all the way, know one thing. You can start again. You can love again. You can even laugh at the things that destroyed you. All you need is a little time and the courage not to go back to hell. Leave a like, will you? Each like is like a pat on the back for this old woman who has come a long way and is still strong, with a sharp tongue and a whole heart. Comment from where you can hear me.